Welcome back. I'm Alfred Weber, and we're with Reverend Kevin Annett, who is the Secretary of the International Tribunal into Crimes of Church and State. Welcome, Kevin.
Thanks, Alfred.
I understand that there are a number of updates and actions that you're here to announce today on behalf of the Tribunal.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that are of great importance. First of all, this Sunday there's a proclamation that's going to be posted on churches in Canada, the United States, Ireland, Australia, and England. And what the proclamation says is it's time for these churches responsible for crimes against children, crimes of genocide, to get off the land of the people. And we found that the court cases have not really brought justice to victims. In Canada, the mass graves have still not been opened up, and the full story not being told. So we figured that this is the next step we need to do, actual eviction orders. And this has actually begun on the West Coast, where Chief Capilano a few years issued that kind of proclamation. This has been picked up in other countries, and we feel this is a step we have to take.
Now, I'm here reading the proclamation. It says they must depart forever from our communities as of Sunday, September 18th, 2011. They are banned from operating in our territories. What sort of actions will you be taking in implementation of this, and how can people become involved in this banishment, or is this just a one-time statement?
No, this is actually an ongoing campaign. People can come out to the churches, for example, in Vancouver at the Holy Rosary Cathedral this Sunday at 11 a.m. It's going to be read and posted. In certain areas, like on reservations in Manitoba, they plan to actually go into the churches and physically evict the people there and take over the building and start using that. This has already happened in a few places in Manitoba. Mohawk Six Nations Confederacy have talked about doing the same thing. And in Ireland, in Cork and Dublin, they're going to attempt the same action. So I think the thing to realize here is that we're not attacking the people in the church. We're saying the corporation responsible for these crimes is not allowed to operate anymore on the territory under common law jurisdiction. So I think this is really important for people to realize that it's in our hands to take this action ourselves. And one of the other issues that I wanted to mention related to this is in a Mohawk territory near Toronto, the Six Nations elders, 9 of them, have actually given us written permission now to begin forensic archaeological excavations on the sites of several known mass graves of children who died in the Indian residential schools. And we've got the go-ahead. We plan to go ahead in the coming weeks and take that evidence in October to the various human rights forums in Europe that we work with and actually say, here's the third piece of evidence that you need besides the eyewitness testimonies and the documentation. Here's actual forensic proof that children died and were killed en masse in these residential schools. So that opening up is another reason that this campaign is going to another level now, and we will have the actual forensic evidence that children were murdered in these residential schools.
Now, here in Canada, apart from the Catholic Church, what other churches were involved in this program of genocide and depopulation?
Well, it was the United Church of Canada and the Anglican Church, Church of England. Those three, with the Catholics, they were the main perpetrators. It's important to remember that the Catholic Church itself set up the plan for the residential schools through the Jesuits in the 1880s, and the other churches adopted that, although, they and the government are all equally guilty of what went on there, including a death rate of over 50%, which the media in Canada has already acknowledged, sterilization programs, forced labor, all of the things that are classified as crimes against humanity have gone on. And since the government and the churches have attempted to legally indemnify themselves from any responsibility and to absolve themselves, it's now up to the people themselves to bring about the sentencing and justice.
Now, this is an action that's being taken starting Sunday, September 18th, 2001. How does this... 2011. Boy, that was some kind of slip up, probably because of the
Yeah.
9/11 that we just had. But how does this fit in with the international tribunals themselves? When will they be held and where?
Well, on what's had to happen in Europe is there was some fairly overt sabotage that went on, including at the venue we had in London, where we plan to open on September the 15th. What we plan to do now is basically move that a month so that we have some guaranteed locations where the tribunal can be held in safety. And it also gives us time to gather that forensic evidence I mentioned and bring it. But nevertheless, locally, in Cork and Dublin, to give you one example, on the 15th, people plan to go ahead, hold the kind of rallies they've been having already. One of the things they're doing in Ireland is they're supporting the move by the Irish government to bring to trial priests who refuse to report sexual abuse of children. They're actually bringing in a law which will allow them to do that now. In other countries like Australia and England and Germany, there's going to be protests. Like, for example, the Pope is coming to Berlin on September 22nd to speak to the German Parliament. There's going to be a lot of protests of groups that we're connected with there, and they're going to be holding their own public forum there to bring out this evidence of Ratzinger's personal complicity in these crimes. So there's going to be different activities happening over the next month or two in many different countries, and we've basically had to decentralize the operation because of these attacks that we were facing, and one of which people probably know about when I was actually deported from England on May 29th.
Well, that brings us to a question. As the tribunal is going forward on this new time frame in the UK, and as you're the secretary of the tribunal, do you think that the UK government is going to take the same actions and, in essence, not allow you to enter the country for purposes of trying to sabotage the tribunal itself?
Well, actually, we've had the support of a couple of members of parliament in England and a television film crew who are going to be at the airport when I arrive. And we've arranged it so that if the UK border agency try to deny me entrance, they're going to have to explain why in front of these politicians and the TV camera. So I think it would be really stupid of them to try that, and now that we brought a lot of attention to bear on what happened to me. Don't forget, when they actually stopped me from getting back into the country, the only reason they gave was they thought it was odd that a tourist would be given public lectures. I mean, it was completely lame reason, and it was just before I was to speak in Trafalgar Square at a Holly Grieg rally, identifying government involvement in child trafficking in England. So it was fairly clear, I think, that it was an attempt to silence that.
Right. Now, the proclamation of banishment also states that the main perpetrator of a regime of intergenerational terror against children, the Vatican and its Catholic Church Corporation, is incapable of being reformed into a benign institution because of its worldview and principles are based on contempt for the inherent goodness of nature and children. Now, so we have the Vatican, and I assume Pope Ratzinger as principal defendants. Have they been served, and have they indicated whether they are going to participate in the tribunal in any way?
We issued to the papal nuncio in England and to the cardinal responsible for these things in Rome. They both received our public summons as far back as April, and they've never responded. They also received papers from two German lawyers who were attempting to sue Joseph Ratzinger as a German citizen for breaking the laws of Germany and hiding and protecting child abusers when he was a cardinal in Munich. Those that action by the International Criminal Court apparently is going ahead. So the exposure we're giving it through our activity, plus the legal arm of the International Criminal Court, hopefully will allow local courts to issue arrest warrants. Now, in other words, if the Pope came into their country, they'd have the legal right to arrest him for questioning. Now, the Spanish government's already indicated that they're willing to do that. We've had Spain is the only country in the world that claims international jurisdiction over human rights crimes. So any head of state couldn't be brought in and tried in a Spanish court. They tried to do that with Ariel Sharon and others. So, again, theoretically, the Pope is now in a position where he could be arrested. So whether it's, the moral exposure of what happened or actual, attempt to detain him for questioning, the church, more and more, their backs are to the wall on this thing. I know that I read a statistics in Austria alone, 38,000 people left the Catholic Church in 2010. And, that shows a growing tendency. That's the highest rate in history for that country of people actually leaving the church. So I think that all indicates that this is really having an impact.
Now, I'm not sure. Is the British Crown and Elizabeth Windsor a defendant in this action?
Yes, they are. We also served a summons to Elizabeth Windsor as the head of the Church of England, the head of the head of state for Canada, as the other main actor in these crimes of genocide in Canada, in Ireland, in England, and other countries where the Crown claimed jurisdiction. Again, we never heard back from Buckingham Palace about that, even though actually we had sent them a letter 3 years ago now asking them to identify these burial sites where the children were incarcerated, and again, never heard anything from them. The Queen in particular is a person, like Joseph Ratzinger, is personally implicated in this. One of the eyewitnesses to this, William Coombs, who died this year in a hospital very suddenly after he was to come and speak at a forum in London. William Coombs was an eyewitness to the abduction of 10 Indian children by the Queen and Prince Philip from Kamloops Residential School, October 10th, 1964. These 10 children disappeared and were never seen again. There were 7 boys and 3 girls. And what's interesting, we've done some research into that, and if you look at the dates, October 10th, 1964, they all add up to 10, numerologically. 10, 10, 10, if you add up all the numbers. 7 and 3 are power numbers in Kabbalism, so the latitude of Dead Man's Creek, where these children disappeared, passes through the Isle of Wight, which David Icke has indicated is a major center for child sacrifice and child trafficking in England. So I think all of those are not accidental. I believe that the royal family are definitely implicated in cultic abuse activities, and this is hard evidence that these 10 children were abducted by the Queen. And again, the fact that William died so quickly after claiming that he was going to come over and talk about this, again, I don't think that was an accident.
Now, of course, William Coombs has died as an eyewitness. Mm-hmm. How will you be introducing his testimony into the tribunal?
We have his testimony on videotape.
I see.
And he gave his permission in case anything happened to him for that to be shared. We have a written affidavit from him as well, describing that. So we're going to enter both into the record of the tribunal.
Now, could you describe for us what the plans are for the tribunal itself in the UK? I mean, I know that you're in the process of getting a venue, but do you plan to have this available on the internet where people can view it? And
we have 2 things about that. There's going to be a YouTube posting of the entire proceedings of the tribunal. There's going to be a final report issued, which we're going to be publishing on the internet. And there's a documentary film team from America that are going to actually be filming it and producing it as about an hour-long documentary. So all of that, we're going to blitz the entire, media network with this stuff. The format for the tribunal will be 3 days of public hearings. Judges will be sitting and hearing the evidence and be actually issuing a decision and recommendation for sentencing. And then, this information will then be out there for people to use in various ways.
Now, under the Rome Statute, those countries that are signatories, and this may be in the process of flux in various countries, if their legislatures or parliaments act in specific ways, can have universal jurisdiction over crimes of genocide and crimes against humanity, such as seem to be part of the record here. And very often, tribunals such as the International Tribunal into crimes of church and state will take their record and their findings both to national courts in certain nations. You mentioned Spain, and also to the International Criminal Court. Do you have any plans in that regard to have enforcement of your verdict and findings, whatever it might be, by either a national court such as that of Spain or some other country?
Yeah, we want to get on two levels. We want to have national governments and courts pick this up. And we've already had some indications from Cuba and from Ireland that they will be looking into this and making recommendations that there actually be prosecution of the people who are named. Another thing that we've had, which was really encouraging, 2 years ago when I was in Rome, we met with a group of senators from the Italian Chamber of Deputies who promised that once we provide the forensic evidence, which we're bringing from Ontario this month from the residential schools, they will take that as part of a package that they're going to present to the European Parliament with a recommendation that actually the European Parliament look at sanctions to be brought against not just Canada and its churches, but the Roman Catholic Church as a self-proclaimed government that's liable under international conventions. So we also have that support within the European Union, which I found really promising. As a matter of fact, I was in Brussels and Germany, and I found a lot of support from the media. They've been, for example, the German media have been broadcasting our documentary Unrepentant pretty consistently to millions of people across Europe. Something you wouldn't find happening. It hasn't happened in North America. So, we've had that political support in other areas, and we're also looking to the Arab world to take this up because, they don't have those allegiances to the Catholic Church and the Christian churches that you find over here.
Now, you mentioned some very revealing evidence about the British Crown and specifically about Elizabeth Windsor and her consort, Prince Philip, and their connection to the disappearance of 10 Aboriginal children. And of course, Elizabeth Windsor, as you mentioned, is the head of state of the Church of England, as well as the head of state of Canada. And these seem to be particularly egregious crimes that were conducted by the head of a church and by the head of state of the country that implemented this program of genocide and of depopulation. Do you have any special measures for prosecution of Elizabeth Windsor, whose crimes seem to go back 30 years?
Well, this is actually coinciding with a move in England by a number of different groups that have been attempting legally to force her abdication because of a number of things she's done, which has actually violated her coronation oath to protect the people of England. Her signing with the Maastricht Treaty, her authorization of the violation of English sovereignty and laws as part of their incorporation into the European Union and their laws. So what we're hoping to do is we actually have a commitment from a number of those groups to actually come to the tribunal and say she already has no legal or moral basis to be the head of that state or the church. She's violated her coronation oath, and once we bring forward this evidence that she's personally, like the Pope, personally implicated in these crimes against children and in authorizing the thing as a head fiduciary officer of these residential schools, then clearly there would be a political basis to then say, it's time to have her removed. And, I think that the people in England, about 40% of them already support a sovereign republic rather than a monarchy anymore. So, I think there's a lot of support for that. What
would be, just to carry this further, what would be the procedures or the legal process by which one would go about removing the British crown on these grounds of moral turpitude? Do you have any? Is it just this monarch, or the monarchy itself, or what?
Well, it would be this monarch in particular. I mean, like, I don't know the legal minutiae of that, how they go about it in England. I know that that the crown is basically a figurehead under the law. It doesn't have power to stop acts of Parliament, and so it'd be the will of Parliament that would, be one of the means to try to enact that. But the thing to understand here is that there's also international laws and ways that, I mean, Elizabeth Windsor could be arrested if she appeared in any of these countries, as just like the Pope could. So I look to, two kind of guarantees ultimately: international pressure and local action, community action. We found in Indigenous territories in Canada that people like the Mohawk elders in Ontario, who have authorized this excavation at the grave sites. It's people, when people stand on their sovereign authority, they can say, "Get off our land. We're issuing arrest warrants for this woman to be tried in our own courts in our own territory." Those are the kinds of things that we look to in the long run, I think.
And what sort of measures? Here we have. You mentioned one of the prime culprits here is the Vatican. Mm-hmm. And the Roman Catholic Church Corporation, and of course, in this case, Pope Ratzinger himself is implicated. Mm-hmm. What sorts of actions, legal actions? I guess you did mention the European Union and Italian parliamentarians who are prepared to carry this forward.
Besides them?
Yeah, I mean, is this to force the abdication of this Pope also? Is that...
Well, that's actually in the works. I've had some back-channel communications from a cardinal in Italy who's actually seems to be sympathetic to a reform of the church and the removal of this Pope. There's actually a movement among a group of cardinals, and including bishops in Germany, to have... to force the removal of this Pope and a re-election. That seems to be in the works. So I think, there's different theories about why that's happening, but I think it's not inconceivable at all for that, for that movement to have the Pope resign at least occur. And also as part of that, because it isn't about one individual here, we're talking about a whole institution, a policy that's still in place in canon law called crimen solicitanus, that orders bishops and priests not to tell the police when a child is abused, in a Catholic church anywhere in the world. So until that policy is removed, it doesn't really matter what Pope is in. The same policy is going to be implemented and expected. Basically, it's a criminal conspiracy to hide abuse of children. And so, changing the figurehead doesn't really matter. It's whether those laws and policies under so-called canon law are removed, and whether canon law is brought under the authority of different governments. And that's the struggle going on right now in Ireland, where the Irish government is telling the Vatican to recognize the authority of the government, and the Vatican is basically turning up their nose at that, and they removed their ambassador to Ireland in protest of what the government there did. So there's a civil war going on now, and we need to be on the right side of that.
Now, with regard to the residential schools and the facts of genocide of Aboriginal children here, then that same policy of the Catholic Church, it would seem, would facilitated the genocide here, because even if there were people within mm-hmm. the system that would have wanted to speak up, they were prohibited from
That's right.
from reporting it. What do we know about the attitudes of the Canadian government at the time? What did the Canadian government do?
Well, that's exactly right, Alfred. And in fact, the attitude of the Canadian government was complete complicity right down the line. It, to give you some examples, it turned over legal guardianship rights to the church sometime between the year 1929 and 1933. As wards of the state, the government or the Indians were actually, since the 1870s, they were under the authority of the government. Well, they handed that right over to the Catholic and Protestant churches that ran the residential schools. And so they were in a role of criminally conspiring to allow the church to do whatever they wanted to these children. They fudged reports when children had died. We have numerous records of that in my book, Hidden No Longer, Genocide in Canada, which people can look at and download from www.hiddennolonger.com. You can see letters from Indian agents saying, children died and basically we didn't do anything about it because this was the property of the church and they could do whatever they wanted on the premises. I mean, there's out and out collusion like that. There's presently the government, through their so-called Truth and Reconciliation Commission, is doing outright criminal activity by suppressing evidence, allowing the churches to indemnify themselves and never be tried for any of these crimes. You can't even name names at TRC forums that are being held across Canada. So this TRC is the latest attempt to really suppress the evidence.
When you say TRC, could you spell that out for some of our listeners?
The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, or TRC, was set up a couple of years ago by the Canadian government with the churches. So, I mean, the criminal bodies, the people responsible for these crimes, set up the investigative body looking into what they did. They do not have any mandate to investigate these crimes or to bring to trial anybody. It's an enormous whitewash, and to the tune of $68 million from taxpayers' money, to basically allow the churches to get away with this. There's not one person who's ever been brought to trial in Canada for the death of a child, even though, in these residential schools, though over 50,000 children never came back from these places. So that's why we need international action. That's why we set up our tribunal.
Now, bringing it back to the proclamation of banishment, banishment, you say, we will conduct a massive and ongoing public boycott campaign of these churches, denying them all financial support, attendance, and public services. The church properties are declared to be communalized, and as of September 18th, will be open to all people on a secular basis to use for their benefit, especially as shelters for the homeless. Their priests and officials will not be allowed to practice in our midst, and their assets and wealth will be declared to be owned by the community and shall be distributed according to the needs of our people. Now, a couple of things. Is this for Canada only, or is this for the world?
Well, it's for everywhere that people feel they have the means and the willingness to enact these things. One of the things, to give you an example, we're doing is we're approaching various unions, for example, the Postal Workers Union, saying, please honor this declaration, don't deliver mail to this institution anymore. We are going in and urging people to go in on Sunday and take the collection plates and take the money and distribute it to the poor people outside. I mean, these are the kinds of direct actions where we're going to say the church is not welcome here anymore because they're a secret society that can get away with raping and murdering children, and that's a dangerous group to operate in our midst, and we're not going to allow it. So, I mean, it's basically an international movement and a declaration.
Now, are you in touch with the Native American movement in the United States? They had their own residential school experience in some cases, and I'm just wondering, how are they involved in this effort?
They're very much involved. For example, we were and have been working with the Tamaki Law Group, which is the group that successfully sued the Jesuits in America. Recently, they had a settlement of $168 million. Unfortunately, most of the money doesn't come from the church. It comes from the insurance companies. And so the church isn't really hurting from that. But what it did is set a legal precedent in America. When we met with the group in the Tamaki law firm and talked to the survivors, one of whom went to Rome with me the last time, they described the same kinds of crimes, killings. One woman saw a Jesuit priest bury a live baby under the floorboards in Omak, Washington at a church school there in 1971 when she was a little girl. So these are the same kinds of crimes against humanity. And again, people can follow all this work. I should mention our websites, the International Tribunal into Crimes of Church and State. You can find that at itccs.org. Hiddenfromhistory.org is our main website, and then, of course, hiddennolonger.com is the information on the residential school genocide in Canada.
Well, thank you. You know, we've come to the end of this segment, Kevin, but are there any final words or thoughts you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Yes, please join us every Sunday, 11 a.m. outside the local main Catholic church in your community. If you want to get a copy of this proclamation, write to me at Kevin_Annett, ANNETT, at hotmail.com, and we'll send it out to you. You can post it on the church, and follow our work at itccs.org. That's where this proclamation is posted, and you can share that and just be part of this movement.
Well, Kevin, we certainly want to thank you, and we look forward to your joining us again from time to time with updates as this initiative and the tribunal go forward.
Thank you very much, Alfred.
Certainly.
Yep.
Thank you.